In this video, we are going to be exploring Figma's components. We're going to be starting off really simple, but we're going to be building up into some pretty cool stuff. So as you can see on the screen now, we have this one component that can just do a whole bunch of awesome stuff. We're going to build out a whole form with it. We'll be able to change between different states of the component. We'll be able to change different things within the component. It's really cool. Figma components are extremely powerful, and with auto layout around now, it's really robust. It's amazing what you can do with just a single component and all the different stuff you can do with it. If that sounds interesting to you, make sure to stick around. Hi there, my name is Kevin, and if you're new to this channel here, it's all about learning how to make the web and how to make it look good while we're at it with weekly tips, tricks, and tutorials. And as I said, in this video, we are looking at Figma's components. I am going to be starting with the really basics of it and building up from there. We're covering quite a lot of material in this video, as you might have seen from the length of it, so I hope that didn't dissuade you. You are here, so thank you, but I did include timestamps down below. If you want to sort of jump past the very basics of it, you can, but we're going to be looking at components. We're going to be looking at how auto layout has changed how I approach making components. So I'm just going to be making a button component at the start, because what's a Figma component introduction if you don't use buttons? But there's a good reason for it, and I do explore a few things in there that are that I sort of changed my approach on how I do it to make those components much more robust. So I'm going to be starting with that, and then we're going to be diving into the more advanced form thing that I do, where it's sort of a mix of using, it looks at what we learned with the buttons, but pushes auto layout to another level within those components to do some really cool and fun stuff. I hope you enjoy it and learn a few things along the way. Let's jump right into it. Okay, so let's jump into Figma here, and as you can see, I have nothing much going on. I have set up some color styles already, as well as a shadow, but nothing too much going on. I will be making a video eventually on local styles and style effects and stuff like that. They're very simple and pretty easy to create and to understand. But the one thing I would encourage you, if you are making components, is to make sure that you have those set up from the very beginning and to be using your color styles right away. So generally speaking, if you're doing like a full design system and making a lot of components, you probably want to do all of your colors first, do all of your typography, and then move into these other things. But this video is focused just on making components and not doing an entire design system. If you're interested in that, leave a comment down below. Maybe we could look at it one day. So I have my frame here, and I'm just going to take some text. And there's two different ways we could do this actually. Let's make a rectangle first. So I'm just pushing R on my keyboard, and then I can come in and make a rectangle. And I know every single tutorial you watch generally will be using a button to introduce components, and that's because they're a really good use case for doing so. So let's grab that. I'm just going to do a center. Maybe my text here could be a little bigger. 16 is not bad actually. Maybe then we could just make this a little bit smaller. It's a little bit big. And I'm going to right away choose the colors I want. So on my fill, I'm just going to click on the four little circles here because I already have my color style created. If you don't have a color style, you just click new and then you can create a color style. So it's not like it's hard. And then I'm going to click on my text there, and I will also choose, I have a white one right there. And so I have a button, and I could use this button. And if you're used to other design software, you probably would do is just option drag or copy and paste, copy paste, and you have more buttons and you just use your buttons that way. So in this case though, we're going to do things a little bit different, and I'll look at a second way you can actually do this as well, but let's just start with that. And before making it a component, what I'm actually going to do is create an auto layout. And auto layout, I was going to introduce this in its own video, but there's such a big part of components now that I'm going to do that. Now you can either go to auto layout and click the little plus sign, or you can just push Shift A. And you'll actually see what that's done is it's called it frame 2. And in my frame 2, I just have my text. And this frame, which is the auto layout, it changes everything to be padding now pretty much. So I can control the padding of my element that way. Now this is also really handy, because say I did button here, I don't actually have to create that box. I could just come to here, push Shift A, because the auto layout option's not here since I only have one thing selected. It doesn't think I want to do that, so the contextual menu isn't bringing it up. But again, I can push Shift A and it still works, and it turns it into an auto layout. And that auto layout, I can give that a background fill right here. So I can give it the color. Let's just do a different one. I can come and create my button, and I can do it that way too. So you don't have to create the background right from the beginning, but whichever way you want to work. But at the end of the day, it's the exact same result. Okay, so now actually into components. So I would suggest doing the auto layout thing first, just because you want to get it exactly what you want it to look like ideally from the beginning. And then what you can do is create a component. The shortcut for this is Control-Alt-K. I'm guessing that's Command-Option-K on a Mac, and I really don't like that shortcut because I can't do it with one hand. So I tend to come up here and use this guy, which is the Create Component button. You can also right-click on something, and in your selections there is Create Component. So I know it's a component because it has changed here. You can see it. If I undo that, or let's just make something else. Let's just make a rectangle. You can see it has my little thing there. If I do auto layout on that, it changes it to something like that. When it's a component, it gets these 4 little things that make like a diamond shape, or 4 diamonds that make a bigger diamond. That's actually really important because that means it's the master component. This is the component that will control all my other components. And if you're coming from something like Sketch, where components usually live somewhere else, in Figma, they live just in the artboard like anything else. You don't need to have a separate place for your master components. And actually, let's just name this, and I'm going to call this one primary because it's my primary button. I'm not calling it primary button on purpose. I'm calling it primary, but we'll get to that once we look at organization a little bit. So we have my button, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to Option drag, or you can do Command D or whatever you want. We want to duplicate it and have another version of this. So again, or you can copy paste, Command D's duplicate, or Alt, or if you're on a Mac, Option drag it off, and I have my duplicate of it. And you'll notice they look exactly the same. This is my master component, and this one here is the instance of it, which means it's pretty much like a copy of my master. So let's make a few instances here. And one thing with instances that you'll notice is, let's say I come here, this would be like click me. You'll see it's changing automatically. That's part of the auto layout. I will do a more in-depth video just on auto layout at one point, but we'll leave it like that. Click me, another button, whatever it is, they all look a little bit different from one another. On any of these, I can go, and then if I look up here where I originally created a component, there is this new thing that's come up called Reset Instance. If I click that, it goes back to the original version. So that's kind of cool. Another thing I can do is right click on that one, and I can go to master component, and I can go to my master component. So I can actually go back to my master if you forgot where it was or something like that. Now that shouldn't be a problem for us, but it could be a good way also if you're working, you might be on a different artboard or a different page, which is something I would look at in the organization. So if you're working on something and you realize you need to update the master, you right click, go to master, it just brings you right to exactly where it is, which can be really handy. So one thing with instances, I can change the text. You can actually change more than just the text. I could actually come here and also change, let's change the color of this one to this gray that I have. So this is an instance, it's still following this one. And what I mean by that is the instances that they're linked to the master. So if I go back to my master now, and I decide to change the padding, I want it to be a little bit bigger. You can see they're all changing with it. So I only have to make one change and it updates everywhere, which is awesome. I can also come up to my round corners here, and let's just say I want to make my primary button should actually be a pill shape. I just have to come up to my border radius and just jack it up until it turns into a pill shape. And they've all changed to a pill shape. But I've changed the color of this one here. So what if I come and I actually change the color to this? Let's see how all the colors changed except for this one. That's because this one I already changed the color of it. So as soon as you change the color of something, it unlinks that one property from it. Everything else still follows. So actually to show you that this one is an original copy. Everything about it's the same. So if I come and I actually change the text on this one, a default button, it's also changing the text on this one down here because this one hasn't been altered at all. Whereas these two, I'd changed the text. So the text became unlinked. This one, the color also became unlinked, but all the other properties are still linked to it. So again, I can come back to here and change the padding on it a little bit, and it's changing it on all of them at the same time. So that's incredibly useful that you can make minor modifications. And you might look at this one and go, oh, I didn't mean to change the color. That was silly. Revert instance, and you go back and you have it back to where you were. So I guess we can change this back to button, just like that. And yeah, that's sort of the relationship between your master component and your instances of a component. And you'll notice when you have a primary component, again, you have the diamonds like that, and an instance is always going to be a triangle like this, or a diamond like this, to let you know that it's not exactly the same. Now, there are times when there'll be something you want to change. A button's not the best example of this, but you might want to change something in here that I can't change because it's linked to my master. So if ever that does happen and you need to change it and you know you need to change it, you can right click and you can actually detach instance or Control-Alt-B for the shortcut. And when I do that, this is now, it's not anything. See how it's gone back to just being in this auto layout thing? So because it's its auto layout thing, so it's not an instance, it's not anything, it's not related to my master now. So if I come on my master now and I change the color back to my orangey red, well, this one didn't change. And if I come here and I increase the padding, this one didn't change. Because this one, it's detached. It doesn't look at the master anymore, it's its own thing. So that can be useful from time to time if ever you need to break something apart from the master for some reason. Now let's come and delete these because we won't need them right now. What I actually want to do is create different states of my primary button here. And this is going to start falling into the organization as well. Let's create the different states here first, and then after that we'll look a little bit more at organization. So I'm going to take my primary here and I'll Option or Alt drag it off so you can see it's an instance. And what I'm going to do right away is I'm actually going to rename this to primary/hover. And I'll explain why I'm naming it like that in a second. And this one will do primary default. So the next thing I'm going to do is actually I'm going to turn this into a master component. Now what I used to actually do is detach and then make my changes and then make it into a component. But I'm going to strongly recommend that you don't detach it. You turn it into a master. So now it's primary hover, but it's a master component. And now you can make changes to this one. So the change I'm going to make for my hover is the one that everybody always does, is a little shadow on there. And maybe we can darken it up a little bit. So I actually have to unlink because I was using, and let's just make it a little bit darker like that. So the hover state looks a bit different. And I'm going to save that as a new color style. We'll call it primary dark. So just so it's saved in there and I can reuse it if I need to. So now that one should be set to my primary dark. So the advantage of working this way now is that I messed up my padding. I want to change the shape of this one or the size of it. Notice how they're both changing together? This is because I didn't detach. If I had detached these two from the beginning before making this hover state, then they would have been detached. If I made a change on one, I would have to make the change to both of them. So by doing it this way, what's happened is I'm changing this one. And you'll notice that in my primary hover, it actually has the instance of my primary default here. That default. We can, whatever. It doesn't really matter what this one's called here. What really matters is the name of the master. So I have the primary default, the primary hover, and the hover is going to be following for everything, but it's also going to have the drop shadow and the color will be a little bit different. So to show you how this is handy now is, actually let's make some secondary buttons too. So I'm going to take this one here and drag it down. And I'm going to, let's change it a little bit. So I'm actually going to remove the fill, but I'm going to give it a stroke of my primary color. Make that maybe 2 or 3 pixels. 3 pixels looks okay. I get the text in there. We'll change the color of the text as well to my primary color. So I have sort of like a outline button there. So now what I can do is create a new master, or a new component, a new master, yeah, that's right. And this one I'm going to call it, we'll call it outline default. And I'm just putting it at the bottom just so it's organized a little better there. And then I'll Option drag that off to the side. My outline default, I think, actually I took the fill off, so we might run into a problem if I add a shadow to that. Let's just try though. Effects, it might, yeah, see how it's adding it to everywhere? So what I actually need to do is, let's just select this and I have to give it a fill of white, and with the white fill on there now, if I add a shadow to it, the shadow goes underneath the button like that. So that could be my normal one, and then this one would be my outline default. So this one, now that I've made those changes, I can turn it into a master component, and that one will be my outline hover. I'm only doing 2. You could have like I'm only doing 2 states. You could have your active, like what's it look like when someone's clicking on it? What if it's disabled? You could do as many of these states as you want. Now, because all of these were originally based on this one, they're sort of like nested components. That's why we have, well, not my primary, but all these other ones have this nested component inside of this component. And it's not really what you hear about when you think of nested components at all. It's not how I thought of it, but I love this because if I come on this one and I make a change, so let's say I change here, again, the padding, because it's a nice straightforward one to change, it's changing it everywhere at once. I mean, the fact that I can change every single one of my buttons and I could have like 10 different sets of buttons here and have everything updated at the same time, I find so cool and so handy. Even I could come in the text here and we could make a change on this text to make it all cap and all of them update right away. That to me is really, really cool and really, really handy. But now onto the organization of them and why I name them in the way I did name them. What I'm also going to do actually here is rename my frame here. Let's call this button, or buttons, I should say. And the reason I'm doing that is I'm going to come on to another page. So page 1, let's just call this components. Components. And let's make a new page, and we'll call this wireframe. I'm just going to come in with a new frame. We'll just do a big desktop. And I'm going to go to my assets now. And what's happened is when I've created my components over here, they got added to this assets area. And you can see it's actually listed under buttons. So that's kind of cool. It's organized. And I can go into my buttons and I can see I have my outline buttons and my primary buttons. So by naming it with those forward slashes in there, it's organized everything here automatically. And it's done a little more than that. So let's just say I have like, I don't know, let's just create something really fast here. Okay, so the very beginnings of a landing page, nothing too fancy, but then I want a button. So I can come over into my into my components here, on my buttons. I have my buttons primary, and I can drag this out and just drop it. And now I have an instance of that. If I go back to my layers, I can see it's a regular diamond. So I have a regular instance of that button, and I can position that however I want to have it positioned. And then maybe I want a second one. So this one could be buy now. And then I could option drag that over, and I want this one to be more info. The only thing is I want my more info, I don't want to be a primary button. I want this more info to be an outline. And well, that means I have to go back to assets and then I have to go back to my outline. No, it doesn't mean that actually. What I can do now is I can click on that, and you can see over here there's a little instance panel. And first I can see that I can choose from different instances. And this is any instance. It's not only going to be my buttons. Remember, instance, we're changing the instance. So the instance is like a copy of my master. So first I can also go to my master component. So this is what I mentioned. If you click that, it brings you to the original. You can make a change to it if you feel like you need to. But in this case, we want to go back to my wireframe. And if I go to this little drop down, I can see I have a default and a hover right away because they're related components. It knows they're related because of how I organized it originally. I organized it by having them here. If you had more versions of it, you would see all those versions in this list right here. Default, hover, active, disabled, and any other versions of it you might think of having. But so I can come to my primary here and I can change it here as well, or I can go to my outline and I can change it to the outline one right there. So again, say I had another one. I don't know why you'd have 3 buttons, more info and something else. I'm going to delete it, so it's okay that I made a typo there. But I click on it, go to my instance, go to outline, and go to the default. Or for some reason, if I wanted the hover, I could bring in the hover one there as well. So just a cool, really cool and awesome way that you can work. I think that's really, really awesome. And so I think we can push that a little bit more now though, because we understand how they're working. And if you're really not sure, actually, what I would encourage you to do is hit pause right now and to try it out. And don't, when you're watching things like this, it's one thing you're going, oh, that's really cool, that's easy, I got it. If you're not practicing this, you don't got it. You need to, if this is something that's new to you, you need to practice it. So, I mean, it's going to take you a few minutes. Create a few buttons, create the other things, try changing the instances around, make sure that you're going through the right order, because I have messed it up a few times when creating my instances and then turning them into more components. So when I was creating these buttons here, sometimes I was doing it wrong and it wasn't linked back to this one anymore. So just practice doing that. If you think you got that and you're good to go, then you can come back and keep going. And if this is going to be tomorrow, the day after, there's timestamps down below, as I mentioned before. Click on one of those timestamps and continue off from where we left off, because I know this is a little bit of a long one. Also, you'll notice here it says return to instance. If I click on that now, whoops, I didn't do it. But you can have the option to jump all the way back to, like here, if I deleted it. Let's just do that really fast because it's super handy. If I bring that in, whoops, didn't mean to change it. If I bring that in and then I go to master, I can then go return to instance and then it'll bring me back here once I'm done, which can be nice so you don't have to go hunting back for where you were if you're on a really big document. So what I want to do next, and this is going to dive a lot deeper into everything we've been looking at, is let's go back to my components page. And I think for buttons, we're not going to need much more. You probably you could have small buttons and large buttons, and as I said, a whole bunch of different states for your buttons, but that's enough of buttons. So I'm just going to leave that just like that. And I'm going to make a new frame. So I'm just going to push F, and I'm going to click and drag out something a little bit bigger. And I'm going to call this one Form Elements. So the reason I'm calling it Form Elements, remember, is when I'm in my Assets panel, it's organizing it by the name of the frame. So giving your different, each grouping of components its own frame is really, really important for the organization of everything. So what I'm going to do on this one is let's make a nice simple label. Label, I got to turn off that all cap. It remembers the last settings you've used on stuff. So turn off all caps. Whoops. Turn off all caps. I think I'm going to lighten it up. I don't want my pure, let's go with like this dark gray that I have. And then, so I have my label right there. And what I'm actually going to do with my label is I'm going to save that as a style. So on my text, I am going to create a new text style, and we'll call it label. This can just really help out in the long run if ever you have to make changes. And this is where it is useful to have all of your styles set up ahead of time. So create style there. So I'm going to have my label, and then I'm going to push R for rectangle, and we can draw out what will be my input. And for the input, I think I'm going to go with, this is why I created some colors ahead of time. We'll go with a really light gray background, and we'll add in a stroke with this medium gray right there. And let's just zoom in on this while I work on it a little bit. Let's round the corners just a tad to soften it up. Something like that. And then inside of there, I'll also place a placeholder. So I'm just going to option drag this off. We'll call this placeholder, which we can change, so I can unlink it because I don't want it to be the same. Oops, unlink it. And let's just switch that over to the regular, and we'll go with like a medium gray. And then bring it to the front. I am putting a label and a placeholder, and we're actually gonna do one more piece here too, which, whoops. So I'm just option dragging or alt dragging again, and this would be important info / error message. Could go underneath right there. This one, I think what we'll do is we'll actually bring this a little smaller. Let's go with like a, you don't want to make it too small, but maybe we'll do like a light italic or something like that. The first thing I'm gonna do is actually take these two, and I'm gonna make an auto layout out of those. So it sort of groups it together. I don't think I'm going to need my auto layout on that, but I'm still going to do it. So a Shift A, and then whoops, I always forget when you do that, I have to switch it to vertical, and I want it to be a fixed width in this case. So I can drag that out, and I can bring this back to that side. And you can set this to whatever size you need it to be. So this is, you can see this is grouped now. So I have my label there, I have my frame here, so we could call this input. And that's fine. The name of that one is okay. So my input with my placeholder in it and my label there. So this is grouped together. And this is important because what I'm going to do is select all of them, Shift A for auto layout. Drag this one back over to the side. When you're in auto layout, you can drag things that would be like right align, center, or left align. So I can do the same thing up here. If I needed to move it, you just drag it, click, click. And now with the auto layout, we can push things a little more than what we did before. Because last time we were playing with padding, but we don't really need padding on this. But what you can do is play with the spacing on elements. So that's sort of like the margin control of the things that are inside. So you can play with the distances. Now it's always going to be equal. So that's why I grouped my placeholder, and you could have just made a group instead of an auto layout. But the reason I wanted those together is because if they were separate, it would actually push everything apart. An auto layout always is going to have equal distancing. If you need things that are going to be always together, group them first and then make your auto layout so that that group will act as one unit instead of being separated. So just actually really quickly, what I mean by that is if I take these two and I group them, they're acting as one unit. So my label and my placeholder are one unit. So if I go on my auto layout now and I change it, it's only moving that further and closer apart because it's treating my label and my input as one unit. But in this case, I don't want to do that. So let's just undo, undo. So there we go. I have my frame. So I'm going to change the name of my frame now. We can call this one input/default. And we have a nice Or nice, we have our label that's there. And we're going to come to why I included this part. In the old days, what I used to do when creating components is I'd have two versions of this. I'd have one with the message below and one without the message. We don't need to do that anymore, which is super cool. And that's because of auto layout. The reason I'm coming up with the default is because maybe we want another one. So let's drag that down. Let's make some changes here. Let's change this. Instead of being this gray color, let's come in and maybe we'll just change the outline. So I'm just trying to get into there. I'm on my input. Oh, I'm on the right place. My stroke. Let's change this to, actually, let's make a new color. So on link. And we're going to go with like a success color. So we can come into the greens. Greeny blue maybe could be nice. Something like that. And maybe this could actually come up now. Like, no, let's leave it. So I could do something like that. Label's still good. Placeholder. Or actually, in this case, the regular placeholder wouldn't be a placeholder anymore. This would be like actual text someone is writing out. And maybe, I'm trying to think, maybe I should have done that with this one as well. I could do placeholder text and regular text. So I'm coming back to my main component here. And what I'm going to do is on my, I'm going to select where the text is, and I'm going to push Command D to duplicate that layer. And you can see I have both. And what I'm going to do with this one is put in user input. But my user input will be a darker color. So we can come in and put that as the dark one, right? Because when you have a placeholder, it's always light. When you have the user input, it's dark, so you can distinguish the two. And you might go, Kevin, that doesn't look very good when you have both. And you're very right, it really doesn't. So what we want to do, that's actually, what I'm going to do is just save the screen here. Plus, we'll call it success. And I don't need you anymore, we'll come back. What I can do though is I can hide my placeholder, or I can hide my user input. And as long as one of them is on, it's always going to only be one line. So this is where it could be useful to have both all the time, so you can switch between the two when you're using this component. So for now, I'm going to leave my placeholder on and hide my user input. And because auto layout's on, it's automatically growing and shrinking, which is really, really cool. And it makes it a much more robust component by doing that. So I have my label. I have all of that set up. That's all good. Oh, you know what I forgot to do the first time around is I never made that into a master when I duplicated it. So let's make that, or not a master, but into a component. So let's turn it into a component this time. And we have my input default. So we can drag that down now, and we have an instance of it. And this time on my instance, let's just change that mid-gray to that green that I'd created. And as a default here on my input, we're going to turn on user input and turn off the placeholder text. And so the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to come on this one, and let's turn it into a new component. And this new component will be input success. Cool. And let's come back up to my original one now, and we'll drag her on down to make an instance of it. On this instance, let's come in and we'll do similar to before, but we'll come in on you, change this to a red color. We'll go with our dark red maybe. Let's go with our primary color. And I think for this one, because it's just an error message, so I can just have it say error message, I'm going to actually have this one also change the color of it, because we want to make sure that it does pop off. Maybe it could even be like a medium or something that's, but we want to make sure, like if someone has an error message, you want to make sure that they can see it. So that can pop up like that as an error message. And then so what we want to do is just come on this one, turn it into a new master component, and then we want to change this one to error. So that is my form elements, and they're coming together, and a button could be part of the form elements, but you know, we have those. I guess we could also do a text area. Now actually what I want to make the text area one, but again, I think instead of having a ton of different components, because we'd have to detach from the original. Like if I wanted to make a copy of this and then get rid of my placeholder and then bring in a bigger box, I can't delete anything. If I select this and I push delete, it will disappear, but it's actually just turning the visibility of that layer on and off. And it's doing that because it's an instance of my master. So I can't actually change that. So I can't actually come in and make a new rectangle and bring it inside the instance. The only way I could do that is to detach my instance, and now I could actually bring it in and make something new. But the problem now is if I come on this and I update it, so let's say I want to change the color of my, this line at the bottom, just for fun, let's make it green so it stands out. You can see it's changed here and here, but it's not changing on this because it's detached. We've removed that from there. One thing we could do, and again, this is by creating a single component that can be reused in as many ways as possible. What we could do is actually, I'm going to come in here and I'm going to duplicate that. And I know it's sort of screwing everything else up, but that's okay. We have this guy here, and I'm just going to call this one text area instead. And my text area, I'm going to actually switch this to horizontal. I'm going to switch it to horizontal, and then what I'm going to do is come on this and we're going to drag that out just so it gets to the right width. I know it's a little bit awkward doing it this way, but it's because of the way the auto layout is set up. We could do it with some math actually to make sure, and actually oh no, that's pushing that way. So as soon as you see that top one moving, you know you went too far. Maybe there's a better way of doing that. You could use some math actually. You could get the total width and then just minus your padding, and then you'd know exactly how big you need that one on the inside to be. But now what I could do with this one is I could actually change the height of it. And this one would be placeholder text area. So we can have a big box and a small one. And again, I'm just going to turn off my placeholder, or not my placeholder, but I'm going to turn off this whole text area. Just because I don't want it to be visible. I mean, you could leave everything on the initial components if you wanted to. It depends on the system, I guess, that you're building out. But then by doing something like that, what we've done is we've created these elements that you could even make this into a form component now, which would have everything involved in it and really have everything nested in, which would be an option. You could have different, a 2-column layout, a 3-column layout, a 1-column layout, have many form elements that people could choose from. But I think what I'm going to do is just jump over to this, and maybe here it could be, we could have the contact section, contact us. So I do have Unsplash opened here, and I sort of like this one. So I'm just going to right click and do copy image, and then come over and paste it right in, and then we can position it where we want it to. And actually, I think let's make this look nice at least. So I'm going to do something where this and this can be centered and center aligned. There we go. So we have my contact us, we have that, and then here we can do where I'm going to bring in now, I'm going to go to my assets, and I don't need my buttons yet. I need my form elements first. So I'm going to grab a few versions of this. 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's go with 4. I'm going to grab them all. Let's just line them up. I don't even think I'd have to line them up, but what I'm going to do is hit Shift A to make an auto layout. They've all sort of arranged themselves in their spacing, so I can bring those a little bit closer together. On my auto layout, let's add some padding that way, and we can't see the padding right now, so let's give this a shadow effects. Let's give it a fill of white, which is fine. And then on my effects, we'll use my small shadow. And now we can see what's happening. Let's zoom in a bit on this. So now I can give that a bit of padding on the top and bottom, a bit of padding on the left and the right, and start building out my form element. Maybe I could round the corners on that a little bit, like so. So I start creating this contact form right here. And now maybe I want to show different stuff in here. And actually I need a button. So let's add my button that will be my submit button, which will be my primary button. I can drag that into this auto layout. When you're dragging into auto layout, it's really hard to see, but there's a little dotted line that's appearing around. That means it's actually going to fall into there. So if I let go now, it falls into there. I could arrange that however I want, and I'm good. Now, actually, I've realized one thing I don't like is, let's go back to my master component, and I actually want this to be a bit bigger. So I'm going to double click on you, and I'm going to drag that out. I want these to be quite a bit bigger, and because they're all based on that one master, they're all getting bigger. The only thing I'm a little bit worried about is that other one, and maybe there's a way of, if you have a way of doing this, leave it in the comments below. Whoops, wrong. I want to bring on my text area because I had a feeling that sort of mucked up, so I just have to make the text box on this bigger, which is kind of weird and awkward. So there we go. That looks a bit better, and I'll turn that text area back off so it's not getting in the way. Now you may be going, Kevin, those are overlapping each other though. That's really awkward. And that's true. But what's happening here, because these are all auto layout, is I want this last one to be my message. So I'm going to come inside that instance. I'm going to come over to my text, my input, and turn that off. And I'm going to come over onto my text area and turn that on, and boom, you have your text area. So I think that's really cool. And now what I can do is just come in my label. Let's change this to first name. Actually, you know what? Maybe we have too many. Let's just do name, email, This one we can get rid of. And again, you can either just turn it on and off to hide it, or you could delete it because you know you won't be using it. Whoops, delete the whole thing. There we go, because you know you're not going to actually be using it. And then maybe I'm going to just bring this all the way to the front. My image can go underneath a little bit. Oh, my image isn't on my desktop. There we go. Perfect. Okay. Maybe on this I could round those corners, but I only want to round this one. Let's just do 20, 20. There we go. So these ones aren't round, so I can bring that all the way off the edge of the page. And we can set up, it's not the nicest page in the world, but you know, we can set up some sort of contact form like that, or maybe that's even on the image or something. Not my favorite page ever, but it shows you how the components can work and work really well. I can come on this and change this to, say, an error. And here we could take this. I could make this one user input instead of the placeholder. And here somebody didn't put in my email address properly. So it says hi at Kevin Powell, but they forgot the thing. And even here it could be please enter a valid email address. Down here also we could come in and, you know, you could play around with this. You don't want any important /error message. You could come in and that's this one. Let's just collapse these down. If you push enter or return, it will open all the layers. And then in my input, I can go take a look. Oh, we don't need my input. I just want my error message. We can turn that off. And then this one too, maybe we don't want that. So we can come on that one. And then my error message, we just turn that off. And just like that, you can start coming up with a nice looking form. Maybe this can go on that side. So there we have it. That is Figma components, really from the very basics to doing something a little bit more fun and using auto layout and sort of pushing how far they can go because of auto layout. The auto layout really does make a lot of what I was doing there possible. Instead of having 10 versions of one component, you can just have that one form element that you can play around with a lot. It does take a bit of a change in mindset, and I'm still trying to wrap my mind around it and use it in the best ways possible. So if you have other ways that you are using it, please leave a comment down below and let me know about them, because this is something I'm really excited about. I'm really happy with this feature, and I'm so, I find it so robust and really, really cool. I really hope you like this video. If you are new to my channel and you just saw this and you enjoyed it, please do consider subscribing. I am going to be doing quite a bit more design content along with my regular CSS content that will be the two of them going hand in hand. So thank you very much for watching. A huge thank you to my patrons for helping support everything I do here every single month. Your support is helping with this channel so much. I can't thank you enough for it. And of course, until next time, don't forget to make your corner of the internet just a little bit more awesome.